Everyone's still talking about Assassin's Creed Shadows. Now, I've tried not to talk about it too much, just because I feel like I'm playing into Ubisoft's hands whenever I do. But I've tried to make my opinion on this pretty clear, which is that Yasuke was obviously added to the game for virtue signaling reasons. I mean, if you look at any other Assassin's Creed game, at least most of them, normally it is set in a certain time period, and you play as someone who matches the setting. If the game is set in ancient Italy, for instance, many centuries ago, you played as someone who looked like what you would expect for that setting. You played as Ezio or whatever. That has been the case until Shadows, where instead of playing as what you would expect, a male Japanese samurai, you play as a black guy instead. It's pretty obvious that it was only done for one reason. Doesn't matter that, oh, he might have been a samurai, he may not have been, there may have been a black samurai back then. That doesn't really matter, because Ubisoft themselves know what people were expecting, which was a male Japanese samurai looks like an Asian person. Instead, they flipped the table. They went ahead and did their own thing. I'm sure that many of the developers on the team, they think that they're saving the world. And, oh my god, diversity, we're going to put our worldview out there for everyone. If people don't agree, they're an ist, they're a phobe, or whatever. But I feel like this game is different than the average, like, Sweet Baby game or whatever, in that senior management were very complicit in this. Senior management knew by doing this, by putting a black guy in there as the main character, they were going to create this massive controversy where you had half the people, probably the side of common sense in this case, going, why are you doing this? We just wanted an immersive Japanese historical game, and we can't even play as a Japanese samurai. And then some people will say, well, no, there is the female Asian samurai, what are you talking about? But it's like, you have a male and a female in the game, so you were very close. You kind of did this on purpose. It's not like it's one character, there's only the female Japanese samurai, that's it, you can't play as anyone else, that's the story you wanted to tell. No, you have the male and female, but you made the male black to create this controversy, essentially. And they knew that there would be two sides against each other with this. Everyone's going to be talking about it, there's going to be all this drama, news posts and all of that. So I just feel like senior management of Ubisoft, they saw this as all publicity, whether it's good, whether it's bad. It's going to be great for them. It's going to be great for sales numbers, great for the bottom line. And the sad thing is, it's probably going to be true, and that's why I don't like to talk about it too much, because I don't want to be giving Ubisoft what they want, essentially, which is more discussion on this game. I'd rather ignore it, hope that it fails, even though it probably won't, and just move on completely. We'll see what happens with it. Hopefully it doesn't do the numbers that they want. But I don't want to just talk about the controversy of Shadows. I just wanted to give some context, because an article has been posted by Kotaku. I am on the old archive here, so I'm not giving Kotaku any money, but it's been written by Alyssa Mercante. If you're not familiar with her, here's her Twitter page, and you might be familiar with her picture. She was one of the big defenders of Sweet Baby Inc. She was there holding the flag. But her Twitter page is like every stereotype of a modern video game journalist, where we've got the pronouns in the bio. She writes for a ton of outlets, it looks like. Senior editor, writes for Kotaku, Games Radar, some other ones as well. And you'd think she's writing so much about video games, she must be really passionate, right? Let's see what she's talking about. What games is she discussing, posting to her feed? Well, it looks like she's talking about Fetterman, Matt Gaetz, so a bunch of US politicians going on about overseas wars. Not a whole lot about video games. It almost seems like she doesn't care about video games themselves. They're basically just a vehicle for her to talk about her political views and push that onto people. Sadly, I'd say that's the case for, at a bare minimum, 50% and upwards of games journalists. And that's probably quite a conservative guess, but she's written this article, this was never about anything other than hate. She's firstly referring to the Assassin's Creed Shadows controversy, which is basically saying, if you think it's stupid that in a game set in historical Japan, where we all expected to be playing as a male Japanese samurai, if you don't really like that, if you think it's weird that we're playing as a black male in this case, who may or may not have been a samurai at all, if you question that, it's not because you actually care about the issue, it's purely hate. It all comes down to, you must hate people of color, or something like that. Movements for ethics in games journalism or against forced DEI in video games are veils draped over bigotry. On July 23rd, in response to the ongoing backlash against a black lead character in the upcoming Assassin's Creed Shadows, developer Ubisoft released a lengthy statement. Now, I didn't bother making a video about that. It's just boring. It's like 4 friggin' pages of text directed at Japanese gamers, not really apologizing for making a stupid decision, which the whole Yasuke thing is. It's sort of saying, like, we stand by this, here's why we're doing this, and if you don't accept it, you're a bad person. Pretty much just lame, just boring. The responses on X were exactly what you'd expect. Racist images, slurs, and calls for historical accuracy in a video game series that has always been steeped in science fiction. Now, obviously, this is disingenuous. Ubisoft have always marketed the series as being historically accurate. You would go back to a certain time period, you'd even meet real people from those historical times, and you'd do missions with them, you'd solve their problems. It was an immersive experience. That's what they were really pushing it as. But Alyssa is trying to suggest that this is normal, like the change with Yasuke. Oh, this happens all the time. It's science fiction, so much fiction going on. When really Ubisoft have set a number of rules in place. This is like, what, Assassin's Creed number 13, number 14, I've lost count. And in almost all of them, again, you play as someone who matches the setting, stereotypically makes sense for that time period, and that helps with the immersion. You're sort of jumping in as just a regular person from that time period, who at least visually would blend in there. If it's set in Italy, you play as an Italian. For this game, Shadows, people expected, if it's set in Japan, you would look Japanese, but instead Ubisoft have done something else. It's obvious why, but Alyssa has to play this card, where you're an ist or you're a phobe if you question it at all. She goes on to say, an unpublished community note, a feature frequently used by users to add context to posts, reads, Assassin's Creed N-word Squire. Now, I don't know a lot about the community note feature. It seems like a good one, but if it says unpublished, does that mean like this is one person who said this? It's not like a whole community got together and called them the N-word Squire. It sounds like one person did that. But of course, Alyssa will attach this one person to anyone who's criticizing the decision and will point and go, you're all phobes, you're all this is how it is. Of course, if you do that to them, if you call out one person on their side of the aisle, like wasn't there the guy who set himself on fire outside of an embassy? If you say, well, you're all like that person, then they'll say, oh, you're disingenuous, how dare you? A fledgling but ferociously loud group of gamers will tell you the Assassin's Creed Shadows backlash is about respecting Japanese culture or refusing to accept woke ideologies that are being forced into their games by consulting groups who hold no real power. But just like in 2014 during the first full-throated iteration of Gamergate, this was never about anything other than hate. I love the number of hidden agendas that are thrown in there, but even just coming back to where she talks about the backlash against Shadows is about respecting Japanese culture or refusing to accept woke ideologies. That's what most people are talking about. I think if people are totally honest with themselves about why they don't like this game, why it looks stupid, it's very simple. It's purely that this is an Assassin's Creed game. It's set in Japan many centuries ago. People are expecting to play as a Japanese samurai, and the same old defenders, Ubisoft, will say, well, you can play as the female Japanese samurai. What are you talking about? It's weird because they give you the option. There is a male samurai, but it's a black guy. It's like if it was Assassin's Creed in Africa and the only male option was a white guy, people would be confused and puzzled as well. In fact, Alyssa and anyone who shares her ideology, they'd be melting down at the idea of an Assassin's Creed Africa where there's a white guy at all. They'd be absolutely losing their mind. But because these people have this weird tier list of oppressed and so on, they might put, say, people of color at the top of that list. So if they're in the game, even if it doesn't make sense, because they're on the oppressed tier list, it's okay. We can't complain because it's racist or whatever. This is what we end up with. Then when I talk about her having these hidden agendas, even just slipping in forced into their games by consulting groups who hold no real power. Again, just coming back to Sweet Baby Inc. Oh, they don't hold power. No one really said that they did. The criticism around Sweet Baby Inc. and so on, it's really about the fact that these crazy development studios would hire them in the first place. It just kind of confirms that the world's gone mad, and when you see Sweet Baby's icon in, you just know that the team behind the game and Sweet Baby having been involved there, that it's all just going to be a disaster. That's why people want to avoid their games. But if we continue on, the internet is a powerful place, an in-between world in which imagery and rhetoric can be weaponized to such an extent it bleeds into real life. In 2014, a misogynist movement demanding ethics in games journalism broke gaming containment with such ferocity that politicians took note. Steve Bannon, the former chief political strategist for President Donald J. Trump, here we go, we got Trump in here, told author Joshua Green that he realized that Milo Yiannopoulos could connect with these kids right away. You can activate that army. They come in through Gamergate or whatever and they get turned onto politics and Trump, and here's where we go full mask off, because we start talking about video games initially. Now we're into what she really wants to discuss. She doesn't care about video games or what's going on with this sort of entertainment. It's all about politics. The election's coming up, so we need to write a propaganda article criticizing a certain side of the aisle. I've seen this so many times where it's like, oh, you go onto the internet and then immediately you go down like this right-wing rabbit hole and you get propaganda of the right wing and Trump and everything. That's absolutely never been my experience or anyone else I've ever seen. I feel like to find that stuff, like 4chan or whatever else, you actually have to go looking for it. Like the average normie who goes onto the internet and goes on a forum, they're probably going to wander to Reddit or something similar, or a news article website. And most of that material, it's left-wing stuff. It's supporting, in current year case, Biden, Kamala Harris, or whatever. That's where they're trying to push you. And it's really only if you decide, I don't know if I agree with this, so I'm going to look somewhere else. That's when you get on to a Trump or whatever else. So this idea that one side of the aisle is pushing all of the propaganda and it's the Trump side, never seen that myself. It feels more like Alyssa and people like her are just upset because their own attempts at brainwashing haven't worked. It's like, oh, we put all of these anti-Trump articles up. We told everyone that if they don't have our worldview, they're a racist or they're phobic of something, and why isn't it working? Why are some people going to the other side? It must be some weird army. They've been activated. It's like a cult or something like that. They seem sort of puzzled that their propaganda hasn't worked and people can actually form their own opinion. She goes on here, harnessing that power forever changed the landscape of mainstream politics. Many believe it directly led to both Trump securing the election in 2016 and the Capitol riots of January 6. Part of what ensures this army remains active is consistently feeding them things they should be outraged about. For Trump and his ilk, it was a veritable laundry list of perceived problems that only he could fix. Immigrants, aka rapists, taxes, a break for billionaires, transgender people, abortion, and more. So she's not even trying to hide anything anymore. This started as a video game-centric article, and now we're talking about January 6th in the election. We've gone all into it. It wasn't just a mention of Donald Trump. It's like we're in full political territory here. And it's like, I always see this where it's like immigrants is watered down to like being a black and white issue of you're either a racist or you're not. It's actually a pretty complex issue. And it's like, immigrants coming into the country, it affects so many things. I'm not going to go into it, but pretending these issues are not nuanced, it makes you look like the moron that you are. There is always something to be up in arms about, always something to ensure you are scared, angry, concerned, and ready to do whatever it takes to get him re-elected. Yeah, because only one side is trying to generate rage. It's not like the other side of the aisle aren't trying to scare people, and so I've seen all this stuff about democracy's on the ballot, and I don't even live in America, so I don't really have a stake in it, but it's laughable stuff. It's pretty obvious that at the very least, both sides are trying to enrage people, to pretend it's like one side of the aisle, and we're the good guys, and they're the bad guys, they're the cartoon villains. Just makes you look like an idiot, or it makes you look like you think everyone you are speaking to is moronic, which is probably what's true if we're being honest. The reactionary right-wing movement in gaming that has reared its ugly head yet again is no different, and it's happening right now for a reason. Socio-cultural issues are reaching a fever pitch in an election year. I'm gonna stop it here. Like, I assume there might be some stuff about politics, but this is a full-blown political article now. Now we've got some quote in here from Jeter Jackson. Racism is in a logical position, so you cannot defeat it with logic. What are you talking about? Originally it was about Assassin's Creed Shadows. Pretty reasonable concerns that some people had, that the latest entry is not consistent with the rest of the series. Obvious virtue signaling, and now we're getting into January 6th, the election. Jeter Jackson, some racial quote. What is going on? Marketing and the design of games aimed at boys increasingly fueled the widespread perception that the hobby was exclusively for them, to the point where many girls with an interest in it were met with parental resistance and cultural shunning. Were you there, or did you just jump into video games like later when it was more mainstream? I'm guessing the latter, but most people in like the 90s, if you played games, there was more chance that you would get bullied. I remember playing World of Warcraft with my friend who didn't go to the same school as me. It's like, I didn't tell anyone at school that I played World of Warcraft. I was afraid that I was just going to get bagged out and people would make fun of me. And I think a lot of people were like that. Outside of like a few socially acceptable games like Grand Theft Auto or something like that kind of broke through, most people were closet nerds. Like, they played these games, they might have talked about it with a few friends, but they weren't super open about it like many people are now. The idea that we were shunning women from getting involved in games, most women were not interested in the slightest. And if you went up and said, oh, let me talk about my latest role-playing game, they would tell you to go away. So most of us were not talking about it, and we certainly weren't excluding anyone. In fact, if any girl put their hand up and showed interest, most guys would be very excited to hear it, and they'd all be gathering around her. I myself only forged ahead in gaming after my parents refused to keep feeding into a boy hobby because I could afford to buy an Xbox 360 with my summer job money. And my story is not unique. I mean, like, just to be brutally honest, it sounds like you probably had some issues with your parents, with your family. I mean, if we take a look at you, we can sort of see a little bit of that. I think that was the probably issue. Internal issues, family issues. I don't think it's the entire video game culture or society as a whole. Maybe just look inward a little bit. Eventually, a substantial number of women, queer folks, and minorities got jobs in the video game industry as developers, social media managers, community organizers, journalists, and more. I like how you've listed 5 different types of jobs here, and only one of them really matters, which is developers. Like, journalists, for instance, who cares? And you're barely in the industry anyway. As demonstrated by this article, you're a political activist pretending to care about the hobby. You don't really give a shit, and if there weren't enough things to get angry at within gaming, you'd move on to something else. I'm sure you will, if this industry ever gets more niche. The rise of indie games opened up the floor for more unique approaches to game development, more diverse schools of thought, more genre-bending titles that divide definition. If everything's so great, why are you so angry all the time and video gaming's getting wrecked by all these wrong thinkers? Apparently you've got your own games to play that are so great. Why do I never hear about them? It always seems like these diverse games that, instead of just focusing on being an entertaining game, they're what you want about your political beliefs, essentially. Never hear about them because they always seem to bomb. The general public's not interested in them. Largely thanks to the Me Too and Black Lives Matter movements, bad actors were held accountable for perpetrating antiquated ideologies or antisocial behavior against marginalized folks in gaming. When did that happen? I don't remember Black Lives Matter doing anything in the video game industry. It's a bunch of protests that just seem like an excuse for people to grab free things. I mean, I live in Australia. We had our own BLM that was really, really pathetic. I think we latched on to what people were doing in the US, so maybe I've got a different opinion on it, but it was pretty sad here. It certainly didn't change anything, and whenever I read anything about BLM, it's about how the owners were basically getting rich off it, so maybe I don't know what I'm talking about, but I don't think anything happened for gaming. Seems like an excuse just to mention things you like. Me Too, Black Lives Matter. It was a fight to get even, a somewhat level playing field, but it felt like we had nearly gotten there, really. But that's when the reactionaries came in. A rumour first spun in the dark corners of the internet gains traction and jumps to the mainstream, and all attempts to debunk it are met with accusations of conspiracy. it gains more traction. Elon Musk posts about it. Are we talking about something specific, or what's going on here? The many were first ringing the reactionary bell see dollar signs thanks to the monetization and virality perpetuated by Musk, by YouTube, by Facebook, and they want more. This is always the most cringe thing where like one side always just says the other side's grifting. Anyone who doesn't agree with me, they're just saying their opinion because they want money and they don't really believe it. Like, only I'm right. If you don't agree with me, whatever you're saying's just for money. But I'm saying it out of the goodness of my heart. I'm not just doing it for money. I mean, Alyssa's getting paid for these articles. Other people are getting paid to disagree with them or talk about something else. Whatever, that's just how it is in the West. That is the capitalist system, essentially. If you jump onto this argument of people are only doing things for money, they don't believe it, that's an endless rabbit hole that you'll continue to go down. It's a dumb argument. It reminds me of when people used to say cognitive dissonance. People did that for a while, but it's like you can apply that for literally anything and anyone, so it never works. More eyeballs equals more money, and you can't get eyeballs if you're not stoking the flames of hatred. Really, it's just people are watching what they're interested in, and people are making content about what people actually want to see. This idea that, oh, people are manipulating you into watching this. It's like, well, no, most people want to watch it. That's why people are making money. People are serving the audience. In most cases. That's how it works. People need to stay angry, stay scared, stay uncertain of their future so they can continue to look for answers, except you won't provide any. Your goal is to ensure that rage continues, and solving those problems means robbing the fire of gasoline. Okay, so after that wall of text, there's actually some examples here. This week, it was Assassin's Creed Shadows. Before that, it was a content warning added to a Capcom game. Before that, it was the perceived failure of Flintlock. Before that, it was the female lead in Star Wars. Concord we've got here. Before that, it was the way characters looked in Concord. Lara Croft's jawline, romance options in Dragon Age, trans flag cosmetics in Call of Duty. All of this is manufactured rage and has been rammed on the throats of impressionable young people, and that was just in the last 45 days alone. Now, if you actually think sensibly about this, the real truth is that these game studios, they add in things that are politically motivated. Not everyone agrees with it, like politics and these different sides. Like, it's pretty much split down the middle at this point. So when you put something political in a game, a lot of people are not going to agree with it. Maybe some people will, but a lot of people certainly won't. In fact, even some people who agree with it roll their eyes because they go, I know where this is going to lead. Like, this is not a good thing for the game that I enjoy. When you're shoving this in, I'm going to entertainment to get away from the real-life political stuff. So because a lot of people don't agree with it, then obviously people are going to make content talking about it because people want to watch it. But people like this, who were the first to talk about conspiracy theories when it's the pandemic or whatever it is, and oh, everyone's insane, they create their own conspiracy, which is that the only reason people are angry about this stuff is a handful of content creators manipulated them, and impressionable young minds were tricked by these people. No, the truth is a lot of people do not like this stuff. We're sick of it. We want games to be made with passion for the medium, not people like you who really just want to work in politics, but you've latched on to video games. And it's really that simple. All of this crap that you've talked about, it is an issue for many because it's getting away from what video games originally were when I feel they were at their best, like the late 90s, early 2000s and so on, where games were just games. They were a fun time. Loonies like you weren't here. It was a much better time. Hopefully we get that back, but I'll leave it there. Thanks so much for listening. I'll see you on the next one. Cheers. Bye.